to the place in the middle of the sun. And we'll sing this song, sing it one by one.
Hi guys, thanks so much for tuning in to today's show. Hope you're having a great day or evening wherever you're listening to this. Today we have a little bit of a different show for you where I welcome Dan Shapiro. And Dan and I talk about his memoir, The Thin Ledge. And just to give you a little background on what this is about, in his book, he shares the reality of living through his wife's mental and physical decline caused by a devastating illness. And Dan goes into that illness a little bit. So Dan was a successful attorney in his early 40s when his wife, Susan, suffered a brain bleed and a diagnosis that her future was uncertain. And of course, they were stunned by this. They had 3 young children, and the couple made the most of the few years that followed before a massive second hemorrhage changed everything. And physically, Susan was badly compromised in her ability to speak, see, and walk. And mentally, she spiraled into depression and experienced a drastic personality change. And in his book, Dan talks about coping, and often unsuccessfully, as he is the first to admit, with the wreckage left in the wake of an illness that destroys a loved one. And Dan addresses the questions that people living through tragedies like this may never mention, but always ask. Things like, should I leave this marriage? The moral issues of having this person who you love and care about and have 3 kids with, but basically become someone new and eventually incapacitated. And it's certainly a situation that I wouldn't wish on anyone, but the reality is life throws us curveballs and we have very difficult situations that arise. And I had Dan on because I think there's a lot of value in understanding that you are not alone. If you're listening to this and you are going through a really rough time, maybe you're a caregiver for your partner, or even if it's a parent and not your partner, it creates a lot of stress individually and in a relationship, obviously. And Dan shares his story. And I think a big thing is to be kind to yourself and to not be hard on yourself. Dan took care of his wife for 15 years while raising 3 kids and being a partner at a law firm. So it's certainly situations out there like that are extremely difficult. And I think there's a lot of value in hearing someone talk about it and knowing that you are not alone. So as always, thank you guys for tuning in. Hope you enjoy today's show. Today's episode is brought to you by our online course, Spark My Relationship.
Do you guys want to create more passion, improve your communication, and build a stronger, more intimate connection with your partner in less than 90 days?
Yes, sign me up.
Then you guys need to check out our online course, Spark My Relationship. It is an online course, like I mentioned, that we created with over 15 therapists and psychologists to bring you guys the strategies marriage therapists teach their clients.
We talk about it on the show. Relationships take work. Sometimes they function pretty easily and you coast along, but we've found the reality is you have to do work sometimes and to make them better, to change them so that they're more satisfying for both partners.
And you've made it here. You've made it to listening to our show. So you guys probably already know that a little bit, but what you might not know are the specific tools and exercises that you need to create those lasting and positive improvements in your relationship. And like Chase said, change does not happen on its own. It takes hard work, and that's why we created the course.
Spark My Relationship is designed to infuse your life and relationship with fresh passion, skills, and wisdom. And it's a self-paced journey that's perfect for turning up the heat, having some fun together, and revolutionizing your intimacy and communication.
And And just some tools and strategies that the course includes is to how to eliminate unhelpful old habits, develop mindful awareness to help improve your stress management, learn healthy and successful communication tools, create a deeper and more intimate bond, and strengthen your couple microculture, which you will find out what that is. In the future together. So for our listeners only, we're offering a special of $100 off the course. Visit sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock to unlock your discount. And there is a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there really is no reason to not give it a try. So go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock for $100 off.
Hi, Dan. Thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Dan, I have not read your book, but I read an excerpt and the general idea, and I thought it is a super powerful story to be able to share with our listeners. So I thought we could start by having you tell us what motivated you to write the book and what it's about.
Sure. Well, let me give you a bit of the background factually, sort of what the story was, and that will tell you what it's about, I think. And the why is, that's a complicated question and a little bit of a complicated answer, but I'll try to present it in a way that is useful. So when my then girlfriend, eventually my wife, she is now deceased. When we met, we were 19 years old. We were on campus in college, and we dated all through college. And then I went to law school. We dated then and got married before my third year of law school. Proceeded on to have a family. We had 3 children. I was working on my career. My wife, Susan, was going to grad school at night. We were building a life, building a family. And then at 40, Susan was diagnosed with a minor brain hemorrhage that revealed something called a cavernous angioma in her brain, which is a malformation of veins that shouldn't be there. And unfortunately, sometimes those veins will bleed. And if a cavernous angioma occurs elsewhere in your body, it's not really a very big deal. They happen all the time. But if it occurs in your brain, particularly the very middle of your brain, which is where Susan had this happen, there isn't much they can do about it. It's not in a place that can be surgically reached. And so she had this minor brain hemorrhage. And then 2 years later, unfortunately, she had quite a severe brain hemorrhage that left her severely impaired in all sorts of ways. It affected virtually all the functions of the brain, including personality, what neurologists refer to as executive function, as well as her sight, her ability to speak, her ability to get around. So she went from being who she was to me for the 20 plus years that we had been together at that point, to someone who was really struggling and was vastly changed. I wrote the book, to get to your second, the second part of your question. I wrote the book because I didn't find very much, as I was going through the experience of being Susan's caretaker and raising our children and running my career. And by the way, that went on for the next 15 years for me. And then after about 15 years, Susan and I separated, and a few years later, Susan passed away. As I was going through all of that, I didn't find very much to read or to listen to or to speak to, even by way of finding a person who had had a similar experience. It's unusual, it's brutal, it's very difficult. And I thought I wanted to write it down, partly because as a lawyer, I've always been a writer, but a different kind of writer. So writing comes sort of naturally to me as a way of expressing myself and my thoughts. And it also, I thought, would make a record that other people could look to try to understand the dimensions of this kind of human experience. And the way I wrote it was really to be brutally honest. I mean, it's a very tough um, accounting of what happened, and I'm sort of unsparing in recounting the detail of it, my own experiences, some of it not very, doesn't reflect very well on me necessarily. This is not me as anything other than what I think is an honest accounting of the way I, as a human being, experienced and responded to everything that was going on.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the details of how you navigated that together with Susan. And you used the word brutal a couple times. And obviously when you're with someone building a life together and something traumatic like this happens, it's certainly a unique situation and what happened with you guys, but not unique to the human experience. So I think there's a lot of value in dissecting this. And maybe we could start with just how your life changed personally, and then how you were able to navigate that in the relationship with this traumatic change and then eventually, becoming her caregiver. So what was the first big realization, and maybe there was a big talk between you two, and maybe you can run us through that and how you dealt with it?
Well, I think the first, as you're asking the questions, memories are popping up. I mean, not just what I wrote, but just in my own mind, I'm recalling. I think the first experience that comes to mind is being in the hospital when Susan was, I rushed her there when she was having the second hemorrhage. We were in Chicago, which is where we've lived, where I'm from, where Susan is from. And I took her to Northwestern Hospital, where her neurosurgeon was based. And I remember, I'm not a big crier. I'm not particularly an emotive person. I think, to some extent, I'm sort of a little bit of a cliche of the way boys were taught to deal with their emotions, which is sort of not. But I remember as she was being diagnosed, and she was in a CAT scan, and they let me stand in the room with her, or maybe it was an MRI, I don't remember. And I was just crying. I mean, I just was devastated by what had happened. I don't think I understood what had happened. None of us did, because it had to play out over a long period of time. But I certainly knew that she was in big trouble, and that that was devastating. I mean, that was a shocking, devastating thing. And I think no matter how it turned out afterwards, that first experience was itself probably experienced more broadly, because I think that's relatively more common. But when you ask, how did you experience this? That's the first thing that comes to mind. I don't think one ever gets over that kind of shock. And then over time, she was in the hospital and in intensive care for 5 months, and we were learning about what the impact was on her brain, on her health, what was going to happen next. All those were difficult realities to absorb. And then over years, learning about what Susan was able to do, what she wasn't able to do, the change in personality that comes when something happens in your brain sometimes, the kind of frontal lobe injury that people can sometimes suffer is fundamentally shocking in itself, because you're sitting after the fact, you're sitting looking at the human being that you knew before, but that human being, in a very fundamental way, is altered. It's not the same person. The stuff that makes us who we are, the spirit and the sort of the internal parts of our soul and our personality, it's all in your brain. And when your brain is damaged, you can lose some of that and have some of it be altered. And that certainly happened to Susan. So all of that was the experience. And it was, even as I reflect on it now, years later, it's upsetting. I mean, it was upsetting then, it's upsetting now.
How did you make space for yourself and your mental health during this time? I know in the book you talk about how important it is, especially when experiencing this kind of thing. And obviously you're saying you're devastated, and through the context of a relationship, how did you think about, things like your marriage vows? And obviously, she's deteriorating, becoming this new person. Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. I think part of the reason that the book maybe has value to people is I don't think I did all of that particularly well. And I think I eventually got to a place that is good. But the process, and you use the word navigating is a perfect word. Navigating all of that was really, you're not taught how to do it. And so, I made a lot of mistakes, and I got some things wrong, and I got a lot of things right. But for sure not everything. And sort of learning all of that, learning how to understand what my limits were, which is not something, it sounds like sort of an easy thing to know, but I found it to be a really elusive idea, to know when you were out of gas, you had no more energy, to know when your own performance as a partner in a law firm, I had to perform at a pretty high level, and to know when I was not able to do that. And it was not something that I knew intuitively. I think mental health is a tricky thing, and mine for sure suffered. I think figuring out what your wedding vows mean, also incredibly tricky, just sort of freighted with moral judgments that one makes about your own behavior, is something that is tricky and difficult. I don't think there is a prescription for that. I don't think there is a way to just solve for that. I think you have to live and sort of do the very best you can, try to be a reflective and kind person. And what I found is when you have these extraordinary circumstances over a period of the 15 years that post hemorrhage that we were together, I had lots of ups and downs. And I went way outside of the boundaries of what I ever would have thought was proper behavior in a marriage, the marriage that I wanted to have. And I try to be really honest about that in the book, so that people who have some kind of experience like this understand that there is a humanity to this that I think one has to take into account. I am not perfect. I'm not even close to it. Sometimes I'm not even good. And accounting for that, allowing for it, really important, I think. And knowing that other people have had the experience, also really important.
Certainly having compassion for yourself when going through difficult times is really important. And do you mind sharing some of the specific things? You said you got some things right, you got some things wrong. Can you give us some specifics?
Sure. I think that it's super personal kinds of things, but that's why I wrote the book, and that's why I'm here talking to you. I think that there was a sense of frustration sometimes, anger, misdirected at Susan, sometimes at myself. If I had it to do over again, which I would not want to do, but if I were to be able to reach back and fine tune my own behavior now, I would certainly try to be more patient, try to be, I mentioned the word anger a moment ago, try to be less angry, try to channel emotions in a way that um, would be more constructive. I think all those things. I'm not sure I did any of that all that well, or all that poorly. I mean, I think I did okay, but not always. The one place that I think was really a saving grace for me was my kids. I mean, my children were small. If somebody had told me that I was going to have principal responsibility for raising them from that young age, I think that would not have been what I anticipated in my life. But I must say, it's sort of the best part of everything. I mean, my kids sort of saved me unwittingly. They were tiny little kids, but they did, and I think that counts too. And knowing that sort of uh, is part of the reporting on all of this that I try to do for the reader.
What would you tell someone who's struggling, they're experiencing anger? I know you said, yeah, you feel like maybe sometimes you did it good, sometimes not so good, but someone that's listening and maybe they're a caregiver, maybe they're in a difficult situation trying to support their partner, ways in which that resentment's maybe building up, they're getting angry, to channel that, have more patience and a better perspective on things.
Yeah. Well, I think what I would say, without giving advice to anybody, because that's not my thing, and that's not what I'm qualified to do. I can just tell you what I did, and what I would say is, if you're able to step away emotionally, psychologically, if you're able to step away from the moment and give yourself a break in terms of the judgments that you're making, the whether how you're assessing your own sort of performance, for lack of a better word. Give yourself a break about all of it. I think it's way too hard to get right all the time, even when you're really trying. And I think that over the course of years, you can't be trying all the time. I think you get exhausted sometimes, and sometimes you don't have the umph for it, and it's complicated. And let it be complicated. Don't fight it all the time. Just understand that it's challenging, and it's going to get the better of you from time to time, and let it go. Let that happen, and then circle back and pull yourself together, and then be there for the rest of it. But I guess what I would say is, suspend your one's um, tendency to judge. In this case, judge yourself, and suspend that. Stop that. Don't do that. It's not always helpful.
You mentioned raising your young kids kind of on your own. How did you navigate that?
I have to say that was so easy. I really have to say I totally enjoyed that. I think it's a place to direct. They're these little kids are innocent, and all they just need to be loved. And frankly, um, if there were a lot of times when I needed that too. I needed to feel that from them, and I needed to direct that to them. The place that I had with my spouse had been disrupted emotionally. And so your kids are a place for to give warmth and to get warmth, and that's turned out to be really a wonderful thing.
Before we continue on, we're going to tell you about today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp.
Nowadays, it is definitely okay to talk about our mental health and happiness. We are not meant to keep everything inside, and therapy truly helps. But what is therapy exactly? Well, it is whatever you want it to be. Maybe you're struggling in your relationship, or maybe you are super happy, but you want to be proactive in your relationship and look for some tools that might help you in the future. Or maybe you just feel overwhelmed with life and need someone to talk to. Whatever you need, don't be ashamed of normal human struggles and start feeling better today because you deserve to feel happy.
And now you don't have to worry about finding an in-person therapist near you to help. BetterHelp is customized online therapy that offers video, phone, and even live chat sessions with your therapist, so you don't have to see anyone on camera if you don't want to. It's much more affordable than in-person therapy, and you can start communicating with your therapist in under 48 hours.
Join the millions of people who are seeing what therapy is really all about. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp, and our listeners get 10% off their first month at betterhelp.com/ido. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/ido. Today's episode is also brought to you by TruNiagen. I used to need a lot of coffee to get me through the day. But recently, I've made some changes to my diet and supplements, and I'm no longer feeling dependent on my coffee consumption. One of those new additions to support my new sustained energy throughout the day is TruNiagen. TruNiagen fuels the body's energy engines, maintains cellular metabolism, and even supports heart health. With 11 published human clinical studies and backed by Nobel Prize winners, TruNiagen is a supplement that's clinically proven to boost NAD levels, an essential coenzyme required for cellular energy and repair. Since taking TruNiagen, I also have more resiliency. It helps my muscles recover from a workout, which helps me feel more alive and full of energy. So if you're struggling with your energy levels throughout the day and want a little more pep in your day, I definitely recommend trying TruNiagen. Add more vitality to your life today with TruNiagen. Right now, new customers can save 10% on their first purchase by going to TruNiagen.com/ido. That's TruNiagen.com/ido to save 10% on your first purchase. TruNiagen.com/ido. This is a paid advertisement, and these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Today's episode is also brought to you by Nutrafol. Thousands of women have taken back control of their hair with Nutrafol, with so many users raving that the supplement not only transformed their hair, but restored their confidence too. Nutrafol offers 2 targeted formulas for women that are clinically shown to improve their growth and thickness with less shedding through all stages of life. So no matter what stage of life you're in, Nutrafol has a solution. Nutrafol Women is ideal if you're experiencing thinning hair caused by stress, dieting, overstyling, and environmental toxins, while Women's Balance is formulated with additional hormone support for those with thinning hair through menopause. Nutrifoil is physician formulated to be 100% drug-free. They use medical-grade botanicals in consistently effective dosages, so you get the most reliable results. As Nutrifol's powerful ingredients bring your body back into balance, you might also notice improvements to your overall well-being, including more restful sleep, less stress, and better skin, nails, and libido. In a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after just 6 months. More than 1,500 top doctors recommend Nutrafol as an effective, high-quality solution for healthier hair. You can grow thicker, healthier hair and support the show by going to Nutrafol.com and entering the promo code IDO to save $15 off your first month's subscription. And this is their best offer anywhere, and it is only available to U.S. customers for a limited time. Plus, free shipping on every order. Get $15 off at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code I do. Today's episode is also brought to you by Bonafide. Bonafide offers naturally derived products to treat menopause, PMS, and intimacy issues. It's easy to use, safe, hormone-free, and recommended by thousands of doctors. Bonafide believes you deserve relief without compromise, so they've spent years researching and testing the purest ingredients to create safe and effective solutions. If you're experiencing symptoms related to premenopause, menopause, postmenopause, or even intimacy issues, I want to tell you a little bit about how Bonafide's products can help you. One of their products, called Reverie, provides powerful hormone-free relief from vaginal dryness with an easy-to-use vaginal insert that renews your body's moisture for everyday comfort and intimacy. Another one of their products is Serenol, which provides relief from emotional PMS symptoms, including mood swings, irritability, and uneasiness. And if you're starting to experience menopause, hot flashes, and night sweats, Relazin will help you stay cool and dry all day and night. They also offer a product called Ristella that supports sexually active women who want to enhance their response to sexual stimulation by increasing orgasms and sexual arousal. Give Bonafide a try today. No hormones and no prescription required. Real relief without compromise. To get 20% off your first purchase when you subscribe to any product, go to hellobonafide.com and use the promo code I do. That's hellobonafide, BONAFIDE.com, and use the code IDO. That's I do for 20% off at checkout.
So you had 15 years of basically being your wife's caregiver, and that alone is just a huge task. And like you said, having a career, raising kids, and it's like you call it the long goodbye, and then moving on from that and growing from that. How were you able to do that?
Just to put in that amount of time, is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just looking back on it, and then for that perspective of, the things you did, quote unquote, right, and the things you wish you could have done better, or just moving on too, and taking that experience and growing from it. Obviously, it's very difficult. So maybe how you were feeling during the long goodbye, and then the sense of sadness when your wife passes away, and moving on from that.
Yeah. Well, it's not the life experience that I had prepared for sure. I think that there is a very deep sadness that one experiences, that I experienced over the course of that 15 years, many, many times, a sort of despair. And I think what happens is that I sort of realized that I couldn't stay there, that it was just too unhappy, that it was too miserable. And, that staying there was, what was the point of that? I just couldn't. And so climbing out of that hole, there are a lot of ways to give a try at that. I tried professional help. I tried antidepressants. I never found that those particularly worked for me, but I'm sure they do work for other people. I found that just putting one foot in front of the other, and being very deliberate about that, and just going out and getting through the next day, has its own sort of restorative power. But to be honest with you, I think during those 15 years, it was a lot of just surviving. There wasn't all that much celebration of anything. It was mostly just getting through it, and then realizing. And I do spend some time in the book explaining this, and it's hard to do just this way in conversation. But I got to the point where I found religion to be helpful in a sort of a weird way. I'm not a religious person, but I did look to religion to sort of help me think about how one manages life and your own in a situation that's really adverse. And I found that religion does my religion, I'm sure all of them, does speak to that. And I found that very helpful because it's an institutional perspective on these difficult questions. And I found that to be more trustworthy and reliable than what I could get from friends or family who might give me advice or say something to me about what to do next in my life that, for a variety of reasons, wasn't as reliable. I found an institutional perspective on the morality of how to manage my life very useful. And I found that in my religion. And that helped me sort of choose next steps.
Can you share some maybe specific examples, or I'm not asking you to quote verbatim any passages, but anything that really resonated with you, an idea or a perspective that gave you a lot of hope and feeling of power in those situations?
Yeah. So keep in mind that I'm not talking about, having a rough period of a marriage. I mean, we were together for 21 years before any of this happened. So we certainly had times where, like every married couple, I'm sure, things were better sometimes and worse other times. I'm not talking about that. It's just, the same tools may or may not be useful in those circumstances, but that's not what I'm speaking about. What I'm speaking about is if you, I felt like I had essentially lost the person that was my partner, and that many years were going by, and I was feeling like my life was getting to a point where I really wasn't able to manage very well anymore. I wasn't getting any joy out of anything. It was not clear to me how I was going to sort of get through or find the next place to smile. And so life became a big question mark, not whether to live, but just how was I going to enjoy anything? And I spoke to, I'm Jewish, and I spoke to a rabbi who I have a lot of regard for. And in the Jewish religion, the sort of central idea is you always choose for life. And I found that to be very helpful because I think what we discussed, this rabbi and I discussed was, well, what do you do to choose for life if your life is starting to be sacrificed to this whole circumstance? And the answer is do what you need to do in order to find happiness. And that was very helpful to me. It allowed me to step outside of my the relationship that I had with the person who was, everything else being equal, still my wife, and recover some of the life and vibrancy that I needed in order to not really be sacrificed to this illness.
And so you found a lot of comfort in that. And it seems like to anyone really struggling in a difficult situation, I think a big thing and why I wanted to have you on is to understand that you're not alone and that this isn't a completely unique human experience. And you mentioned it earlier, to not be so hard on yourself and so judgmental. And then what you're saying, what resonated with you kind of is to, at a certain point, maybe to choose yourself. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like, yeah, it's like you want to be there for your partner, but there's a certain, and every circumstance is different. Obviously, there's times where if someone gets sick and it's 6 months in, you're like, ciao, that might not be the perspective we want to take. But 15 years and being a caregiver and just having compassion towards yourself during that time. And then at a certain point, having those hard discussions with your partner, if they're able to, but with yourself and saying, I have to choose my life in this moment.
I don't think you're putting words into my mouth at all. I think you have it exactly right. I think what you just said is a very good summary of the tension that that this kind of circumstance creates. And I think, look, if somebody and again, I'm not in the advice giving business. I'm just telling my story for what value it may have. But if somebody is married to someone with a substance abuse problem, for example, and that is destroying the person with the substance abuse problem, that may be an illness. I mean, I assume it is an illness. Fortunately, I didn't have that experience. But if that happens, I don't think anybody really has a big question as to whether the healthy spouse ought to go down with the ship, be drawn into the illness, or whether the healthy spouse ought to make choices to preserve and enjoy his or her own life. I think, that's sort of well settled morality at this point in our society. I'm not sure this is any different than that. It's, the facts are a little bit different, but it's, if you lose your partner and your spouse effectively, even if they're still there, but they're not, through nobody's fault, they're not your partner for your life, and you can't get the things that you need, what do you do about that? And at some point, I made the judgment, after a long time, and I mean, honestly, the issue that I have in my life was 15 years too long, because I can't get any of those years back. I don't know. It just is. It is what it turned out to be. I don't regret any of it. But I do have questions about how to manage and, to use your word, navigate all of it well. And my hope is that the book gives you enough of my experience so that you can at least kick ideas around, and maybe have something to bounce up against and say, well, this provokes me to think about this a certain way or that way, and this guy did it this way. I don't think I'd like to do it that way. I think something else makes sense, and I hope it has some value that way. And even for other people, maybe it's interesting, just as a moral inquiry about what being a human being and a partner with a spouse, what it means.
Well, Dan, thank you so much for sharing your story. And yeah, I think that is really where the value is. You mentioned the 15 years you can't get back. Well, someone listening might be in year 4 right now, or someone listening might not be in it, but in a couple years they are. And there's a lot of pressure, there's a lot of pressure that we put on ourselves, that society tells us how we should act. And in the end, there's different ways to navigate it, to continue with that term. And, you can't go back and change what happened, but you can say to someone listening, hey, if you're in year 4, you don't necessarily have to do what you're doing. Maybe choose life. And the best thing for you and your partner is not what you're currently doing. I think that's an important thing, whether it's a traumatic situation or if you're just in an unhealthy relationship and you're repeating the same negative cycles. And there's a lot that can weigh our decisions. If you have kids, you have a career, you're like, we have to make this work. And sometimes the right answer is maybe to let go of that situation, and to navigate that in the best way possible is certainly tricky, but just bringing that to your awareness is important. So I think there's a lot of value in that, Dan, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your story. Before we wrap up, can you tell our listeners where they can learn more about your book, find it online, and if there's anything you want to leave them with, and then we'll say goodbye.
Your summary just now I thought was particularly good. I mean, I think figuring out, it's clear to me that this conversation and these concepts is just the beginning of the thought process for people who are listening to this, or for people who might have this come up at some point in their lives. It's just a really complicated and really interesting human problem, and I think I think you've done a very good job of sort of asking questions and summarizing points to really grab the nub of it. I think I think what you said is very on point. With respect to where to find the book, Amazon is the easiest way to do it. Just go to, Google The Thin Ledge. That's ThinLedge. I don't even think you need to put Shapiro into that, but if you put in The Thin Ledge Shapiro in an Amazon search, you'll go right to the book. It's an Amazon bestseller. It's not hard to find. I have a website, which is danielpshapiro.com, but there's no need to do that. There is a way to buy the book on the website, but the easiest thing to do is to go to Amazon. And I hope people do buy it, because if there was a way to get it without buying it, that'd be even better, because this isn't about the finances of it. But I do want the book to get traction. I would like people to read it, because I do think one of the benefits of having gone through this grinder is that I can relate some things to other people, and maybe it'll help.
Well, I think that is an important thing that you're able to offer, having gone through all that. And I do appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing and putting this book out there. So we'll have the links in the show notes to find your book and on our website at idopodcast.com. And thanks so much for coming on, Dan.
Thank you so much.
As always, thank you guys so much for tuning into today's episode. As always, all the links to the guest, as well as any of their recommendations, will be in the show notes page. You can find the link to that in the episode description, or by going to idopodcast.com. Click on the podcast tab up at the top, and you will have access to all the episodes that we've ever done. There are over 300 of them. And while you're on our website, if you haven't checked out our free 14-day Happy Couple Challenge, we really hope you do. It's a free email challenge that we send to you. It's 14 days of fun, easy, doable challenges to help strengthen and improve your relationship. And if you're looking for something that provides a little more help with working on your relationship, whether it's improving intimacy or communication with your partner, or just bringing the spark back, we would love for you guys to check out our online course, Spark My Relationship. We're offering $100 off to all of our listeners if you go to sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. We've worked with over 15 psychologists and therapists to create the real life tools and strategies that they are teaching their clients. So we wanted to give them to you. It's a self-paced online course that can be done in as little as a month or up to 3 months. You can really decide how much or how little you want to do with your partner, or maybe just yourself. So we hope you guys check that out. It's sparkmyrelationship.com/unlock. Have a great day.